Okay, here we go then with the first lesson of GCSE Business Studies, and we are going to look at business objectives today. Okay, so I've got some objectives of my own. I want you to make sure that you know what objectives are, that you can identify objectives for a firm, and you can discuss the conflict that comes about from objectives, and we'll be doing that in the lesson. Okay, so we'll start with two definitions. Make sure these get into your books. You need to know what business objectives actually are, and this is what the business is trying to achieve. They set these targets, these aims, and they all come together as objectives that the firm is trying to achieve, usually within the year. Contrast that with a mission statement, and a mission statement is more of a summary of all the firm's objectives, because they can have more than one. But also a mission statement is a more long-term aim for the business. Okay, and that may be 5 to 10 years, where an objective tends to be an annual thing. Okay, so there are four types of objectives. We've got profit and growth, survival, and providing a service. So we'll start with the profit. Within this, we've got three main types of profit objective. First of all, it could be quite simple. You just want to grow your profits. You mean for them to be bigger than what they were last year. Okay, now this may involve some investment in advertising or new products or new product development, but you're ultimately wanting to make your profits bigger than last year. Satisficing, it is a word, I haven't made it up. This is making enough profit just to meet the needs of the firm. So you are satisfied with the amount of profit that you made. Now that might be a high amount of profit, it might be a low amount of profit. And as I've pointed out in there, it works quite well with a charity because of course they're not out to make necessarily a profit. And finally, we've got maximising. Now, profit maximising is usually for big firms, established firms that have the ability to get their costs as low as possible and their price as big as possible. This creates a huge gap between costs and price that is profit, and that is how you go about maximising that. But it does mean this probably is only available to those big businesses. Okay, we've already seen one growth objective to do specifically with profit. There are other growth objectives that you can have. So it might be that you just want to sell more items. Okay, so sales growth will come about from that. This is about physically selling more items. Okay, but don't forget, it will cost you money to do that. You will have to advertise, you will have to buy in the stock as well. So while you may be selling more items, you might not be making as much profit as you had hoped. It could be that you want to grow your market share. Now, this is when you actually have more customers. If we compare that with the sales one, it could be that you sell more goods to your existing customers. That will help increase your sales. But if you get more customers, it means you're taking them away from your competitors and you're increasing your market share. And finally, it could be the elimination of the competition. Now, no, it doesn't sound much like a growth objective, but that happens by you growing physically in size. So you may take over other businesses. Therefore, instead of being 5 businesses selling a product, there are now 4, and you are the largest of those 4. Survival is the most basic objective, and it tends to be for when firms are starting up. They want to survive the first few years. Now, it means their profit might not necessarily be high, their costs might not necessarily be low, but they've got enough money being made. Or, as we are at the moment, when we've got a recession and times are hard and the economy is struggling, simply surviving by ensuring you can keep your customers is a perfectly acceptable objective to have. Okay, so there's two main situations that you may use that one. And then finally, we've got provide a service. So this could be to support one of your other objectives. So if you provide a good service, it may help you make more profit. It may help you increase your sales. Okay, so that is one way. It could also be for a certain type of business. It might be that you are a charity or a public sector business like a hospital or a school where providing a good service is more important than creating profits. Okay, now that will become clearer when we look at different types of organisations later on. Okay, so those are the four main areas. The problems arise from the fact that objectives conflict with each other, and we've already kind of touched on some of those areas when talking about growth and profits, etc. So we'll start with that one. If you want to grow a business, you need investment. So investment means increasing your costs. It could be increasing your advertising costs. It could be increasing your rent or your property costs because you need to get bigger. And obviously, the minute your costs go up, it eats into your profit. So it's very hard that you will actually complete growth and profit objectives in the same year. If we take growth and service, again, growth implies we're getting bigger, we want to get bigger, that's what we want, but often at the cost of good customer service. As we get bigger, we become more detached from our customers, and so therefore we find it harder to provide that service that perhaps gave us our good name. So again, growth and service often cause problems. And then finally, as we've already said, with survival being the most basic objective, that will often conflict with profit. Often to survive, you don't want to make a profit, you just need to make enough money to cover your costs. So you're not going to have survival and profit in the same year as an objective. You will either be surviving, making enough money to cover your costs, or you will not be surviving, you will be making a profit because you are a good business that is able to keep their costs under control, keep their money coming in and generating profit. Now, with all objectives, they need to be SMART. Okay, and it's in capitals because it is standing for something for each letter. Okay, so S is specific. They have to be very specific. So if you want sales growth, then you might want sales growth of 10%. Okay, that means they then become measurable, because what you can do is look at how much sales you had this year and see if it is 10% higher next year. It also needs to be achievable. So 10% sales growth needs to be possible. If there is a recession, if the business is struggling, 10% may not be likely. It might only be 5%. So it does need to be achievable, which links in with the R of realistic. You have to make sure your objectives are realistic. It doesn't mean that you make them easy and say, well, we only want a 1% sales growth, but it does need to be realistic so that you can improve the business and keep moving on. After all, that's what objectives are set for, to help improvement. And finally, they do need to be time specific. So as I said, to increase sales by 10% by next year means that in 365 days, we will then look to see whether we have met that objective. So all of the objectives, whether they are profit, whether they are growth, they need to be SMART. Okay? And finally, mission statements. Now, as I said, objectives tend to be a very short-term process for the business. They will set an objective, they will wait maybe a year, 6 months, see if it's been met. When it's been met, they will then set another one. So if we have our 10% sales growth, if we've got 10% in a year's time, we might then say, well, we'll have another 15% for the next year, because objectives are all about setting benchmarks for us to move on and improve. A mission statement is a bit bigger than that. A mission statement is something that the whole firm, every department, every person is working towards, and is not necessarily SMART, but it will be realistic. The time element of this one, though, is more likely to be longer, 5 to 10 years, even longer than that. Okay? So, as I've said there, it's an overarching summary of the firm's objectives, usually more long-term. So if we take, for example, Tesco's mission statement, okay, their mission statement is our vision is for Tesco's to be the most highly valued by customers we serve, the communities in which we operate, our loyal and committed staff, and our shareholders. To be a growth company, a modern and innovative company, and winning locally, applying our skills globally. So you can see there is not anything specific, there's no percentages, there's no dates, there's no times in there, but this is something that will then be used to set all the objectives for the next 5 to 10 years. And you can see that there are things in there about growing, there are things about their staff and their owners, the shareholders, there are things about their customers. So what they will then do is take those areas and set an objective, maybe providing a service for customers, maybe growing profits for shareholders. Okay, so a mission statement, slightly larger organisations' aims, and then the objectives are how you are trying to achieve that mission statement. Okay, that's it for this presentation. You need to make sure that you've made notes on this. Okay, so in your books, you need to have the definitions written down. You probably need the different objectives written down. Because this is a video, you can go back and listen to me, or you can put the volume off and make some notes and pause at your own pace. Other than that, you don't need to do any written work, other than writing one question. So something that I've said, something you're not sure of, something you want to raise in the lesson. The first 10 minutes of the lesson will be this question and answer session to make sure you understand the topics before we look at the activities. And of course, I want to make sure that you have watched this and taken on board what's there. So you need to use your password, username that I gave you, to go to zondel.com and complete the objectives quiz. It should be loaded up into your area. I've assigned it to your group after the lesson. So watch the video, make your notes, complete the quiz, and turn up with a question about business objectives, and then in the lesson we will do lots of activities about objectives to make sure you understand. I hope that's not been too painful, and I will see you in the lesson.